Do you know that voice in your head? The one that whispers you're not good enough? The one that magnifies your flaws and undermines your strengths? That's your inner critic. It's cunning, persistent, and often it feels impossible to ignore. But here's the truth. That voice is not your master. It's not your truth. Your inner critic is a reflection of fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of change. And while fear has its place in protecting us from danger, it has no place in deciding who you are or what you're capable of achieving. Let me tell you a story. There was a boy named Alex. Alex was bright, curious, and full of dreams. He wanted to become a writer, to craft stories that moved people to laughter, tears, and inspiration. But every time Alex picked up a pen, that voice in his head would say, "Who are you kidding? You're not talented enough. You'll never be good at this." For years, Alex believed that voice. He'd start a story, then crumble the paper in frustration, convinced he wasn't good enough. He watched others chase their dreams while he sat on the sidelines, too afraid to try. One day, something changed. Alex came across an old notebook in his attic. It was from his childhood, filled with stories he'd written as a boy. They were simple, raw, and far from perfect, but they were also fearless. Young Alex didn't know about failure. He didn't fear judgment. He simply wrote because it brought him joy. That moment sparked something in Alex. He realized that his inner critic was a learned voice, not an inherent truth. It had grown louder over the years, fed by insecurities and comparison. But just as it was learned, it could be unlearned. Alex made a decision that day. He was no longer going to let that voice dictate his life. How did he do it? First, Alex recognized the voice for what it was, a passenger, not the driver. He started to separate his identity from his inner critic. When the voice said, "You're not good enough," Alex would pause and ask, "Who says?" He began to question the validity of those statements, and more often than not, he found they were baseless. Next, Alex practiced self-compassion. He realized that he had been speaking to himself in ways he would never speak to a friend. He began to replace harsh criticism with kind encouragement. Instead of saying, "You're terrible at this," he would say, "You're learning." Every step forward counts. Alex also started taking small, consistent actions toward his dream. He wrote a paragraph a day, then a page, then a chapter. He gave himself permission to write poorly, knowing that progress mattered more than perfection. Over time, something incredible happened. The voice didn't disappear, but it grew quieter, and Alex's confidence grew louder. Now, let me ask you, how often do you let your inner critic take the wheel? How often do you allow that voice to stop you from trying, from dreaming, from living? It's time to silence your inner critic. Here's how you can do it. Name the critic. Give your inner critic a name. Call it doubt, fear, or even something silly like naggy. By naming it, you create distance between yourself and the voice. You're no longer saying, "I'm not good enough." You're saying, "Nagy says I'm not good enough, but Nagy doesn't know me." Challenge the thoughts. Every time your inner critic speaks up, challenge it. Ask yourself, is this true? What evidence do I have? Most of the time, you'll find that the voice is basing its opinions on fear, not facts. Practice self-compassion. Imagine speaking to a child who's learning to walk. Would you criticize them for falling, or would you encourage them to try again? Treat yourself with the same kindness. You're learning, growing, and evolving. 4. Take action, even imperfectly. Confidence is built through action. Start small, make mistakes, learn from them. The more you act, the more you realize that failure isn't fatal, it's a stepping stone. Surround yourself with people who believe in you, who uplift you, and who remind you of your potential. Celebrate every win. Confidence doesn't come from one big victory. It comes from celebrating every small win. Did you try something new? Celebrate. Did you silence the critic for 1 minute? Celebrate. Each step forward is a victory. Your inner critic is not invincible. Remember, your inner critic is not invincible. It thrives on your belief in its words. The moment you stop believing, its power begins to fade. Alex eventually became a writer. His stories touched lives, inspired change, and brought joy to countless readers. But Alex didn't succeed because he silenced his inner critic completely. He succeeded because he stopped letting it control him. You have that same power. You are more than the voice in your head. You are your dreams, your actions, your resilience. The next time your inner critic speaks up, look it in the eye and say, "Thank you for your concern, but I've got this." And then take the next step. Because confidence isn't the absence of fear, it's the courage to move forward despite it. So, what will you do today to quiet the critic and amplify your confidence? Whatever it is, start now. Start small. And never stop believing in the person you're becoming.